This is Gemara Avodah Zarah Daf Samoch Ches, and as we enter into the month of Elul, all the learning has been dedicated by a close friend of a Daf, as a schos alias nishama of Aster Reyzel Basra Meir, whose yahrzeit is on tomorrow's Daf Beis Elul, B'siyat D'Shmaya, the incredible Koyach HaTorah, Talmud Torah Berabim, should bring the Heilige Neshama of Aster Reyzel Basra Meir higher and higher in the Gan Eden Shalmaila, closer to the Kisei HaKavod, and ultimately be a Milat Yesher for the entire Mishpacha. We're picking up 4 lines on the top of Samachez and Aleph. Amar Ula. We're in the middle of a long sugya of Noisein Tam Lifkam, and at what point the detrimental taste indeed makes an item makes an item mutter. So Amar Ula, says Ula, the aforementioned Machlekes Rameir and Rav Shimon is only in a case of Sheshbiach L'B'Sayv Pagam, that there was a moment of Shvach, and only afterwards did it come Nifkam. That's, when there's a sheet of Rameir that holds it's going to be Aser. But says Ula, arguing on that which we ended off yesterday, Shir, Aval Pagam Meikara Divrei Kol Mutter. But says Ula that if something is always Lefgam, if something is a real and true Noisei Tam Lefgam, everyone holds it's going to be Mutter. Asks the Gemara 6 lines down, Ezer Rav Chagol Ula, Yain Shenavel Techadoshim, wine falls into lentils, or v'chaimetz, vinegar, shenavel gerisin, into split beans, ulcer, Rav Shimon mater. Over here, there's the Tanakam that says it's ulcer. V'hacha tepagam eikaru, even though it's right away nifkam, it's right away a detrimental taste, and yet, ubligi, we see there is a shita, there is a machlekes, Tanakam Rav Shimon, Rameir Rav Shimon, whether Neis Tam Lefkam is mutter or not. Amar Ula, explains Ula, Chaga, loimei de yada mai kamri rabbanan. Chaga, you didn't know what the rabbanan are saying to you. Yavta kamesev, you're asking me a kasha. Hacha b'may askinon, explains Ula, you know what the case in that brisa was. The case was like we learned prior, it fell into the beans when it was cold, and then then it was boiled up. That's a case. Nasa Kemi says and it's going to be, that will be the case that it will be Aser according to Rameir. But says Ula, if it was truly Nifka Meikara, then no, everyone would agree it's going to be Mutter. Rav Yochanan Amar Bepagim Meikara Machlekes, even when it was originally Nifkam, it is a Machlekes Rameir and Rav Shimon. So Ibayilahu asks the Gemara and Rav Yochanan, does Rav Yochanan hold that when originally it's a bad taste, that's the machlekes whether it's mutter or not? But on the flip side, everyone's going to hold the rekol it's ulcer because there's an element of shvach. Says the Gemara Teiko, we're going to have to wait for Mashiach Liyahu Navi to answer this shaila. Amar Rav Amram, Efshar Isel Ad Rav Yochanan, Lotani Allah b'mastita, and it's a pasuk of Yochanan, such a thing that we don't learn in the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, if Rav Yochanan is right, that there is such a sheet of Rameir that even when something is nifka meikara, it will be aser, must be we have a source. So Nafak, they went out, they searched Vashach, and they found it Tanya. So Ar Shal Chulin 11 of Chulin Shenafal Teichis that fell into a dough. The Yeshuk de la Hachmetz, and is enough to create that it became Chaimetz, it became leavened, it became dough, Vechmitza, and indeed such happened. And then what happened? First went from the Chulin, and then it went into the Chuma. Oisar Shal Klaya Karim Veshuk de la Hachmetz Nachamol Aser Rav Shimon Matir. So the Tanakama Nachmal he held it's Aser. Says the Gemara, what's this case? This is a case where it was Nifka Meikara. And yeah, what do we see? Upligi, we see there is a Machlaikas. Amar Rav Zera, 3 lines from the white lines. No, there's no raya from this case. Shiny Isa Hayel Veruel Lechama Boykama Isa Isacherois. Isa is going to be different. Why? Because since it has the power, yeast is such an entity that can continuously be chaymet, to continually turn chametz and 11 other items. Therefore, it's not going to be considered a regular nifkam. Tashema says, we're trying to bring another raya in the last narrow line. Sar shal chuma v'shal chulin shenaf l'toicha isa. Bezek dilachos, ek dilachos. Each one has enough to be chaymet, to be machmitz. V'chimsu, and it does. Also, Rav Shimon matir. Navashal chuma t'chila. Then divrei hakol. Also, everyone's going to hold it. But then, if afterwards navashal chulin v'achal navashal chuma or shaklaya kerem, also Rav Shimon matir. So what do we see? Nachamal says the Gemara. We have another raya v'achat pagam eikara upligi. Again, we have another case in which the nifkam, the chuma, fell in after the dough already been leavened, after already became machmitz, after it was already chametz, it already was a dough. Then it fell into the next entity, and therefore it's considered to be nifkam. It's not adding a beneficial taste; it's adding a negative taste. And yet, what do we see? We see there still is a machlokes. So says the Gemara, this will be a case of noistam nefkam that we see a shita. It's going to say it's aser. Let's just see. Rashi over here explains. Can we just find the Rashi quickly? 1 second. Rashi, if you look a little higher up, about 12 lines down, Rashi explains this yisoid, that this ar mishashanavul be pagma sharei mechumetzes kvar, cause it was already chaymis. That's why it's considered a paigim. That's where it's considered that's adding a detrimental effect. You already have yeast; you don't need more yeast, and that's why it says the Gemara, this shall be the makar. Then nifka meikara is going to be a machlokes. Says the Gemara, v'chitema, maybe you're going to suggest, hachanami, that this case as well, as we turn over to Samachesim and Beis, is Kidder Rav Zera. Maybe tell me this old, also, like the first raya that we debunked, is Rav Zera that what, as the Tab Rashi explains, the chimetz yesim midai is a shvachul, and chimetz isas acheroitz. The fact that now it has the extra yeast, and now has the ability to make other things into a matziv of chametz, says the Gemara, but that can't be. Why? Tashma miseifa that says what? Reason aser for Rav Shimon matir. And here also, maybe you're going to tell me, like we said in Amar Aleph, that what was the case? The case was dafka that fell cold and then was heated up. Says the Gemara, meaning within this brisa, you can't explain that it's a case of cold and then hot, because then it wouldn't be parallel with the Reisha and the Seifa. Elav Shema Mina, B'payim Eikara, Machlokes Shema Mina. So says the Gemara, this is going to be a raya that when something, even if it's nifka meikara, is indeed a machlokes or Meir and Rav Shimon, that there is a shita that even though it was always a detrimental taste, it will still be aser. Says the Gemara, okay, so you have a raya. But now let's go a little bit deeper into this brisa. Hani talasi bavi dikatani lamli. Why lemaisa did the brisa have to say 3 cases? Okay, so the last case is really what we're looking for, and that's the biggest chiddush. That which is always paigim is machlekes. Mitziyasa, now I'm in the middle case, I'll tell you which pagam dever call also the flips. Elareisha lamali. What do we need? Says the Gemara, the first case. In the end of the brisa, there's no shvach at all. It was fully nifkam. And yet, what's the halacha? Asi rabbanon. Reisha to kamashvach mi boy. The reisha where there's a little bit of shvach, of course it will be aser. So ask the Gemara, this third case in the brisa seemingly is not necessary. Amar Abaye, so it comes like Abaye, perhaps a bit of a deichik teretz, but explains Abaye. I'll tell you what's going on over here. Reisha le Rav Shimon itzrich. The reisha we need according to Rav Shimon. That what? V'achi kamer leRabbanan leRav Shimon. Isa zuriyah lahachmitz b'shtei shais. This Isa, it's ra'i to become chametz in 2 hours. Migaram lo shetachmetz b'shah achas. If you put double the amount of yeast in it, will it make it chametz in 1 hour? Isser, then it will be also. Rav Shimon argues on that nikuda. Ksheshbichu shneim ishbichu, kshepagmu shneim pagmu. Says Rav Shimon, no. He says that when the 2 doughs give a shvach, it enhances them. It's both going to be called an enhancement, and both will be called an ifkam. Therefore, that will not be a chiddush. Says Gemara, Rav Shimon, litzarif heter ve'isser b'adi adadi v'lissar. They should combine and be aser. Says the Gemara, no, Rav Shimon has a chiddush. L'taimei, Rav Shimon made damar afilu isser ve'isser nami loy mitztarfin. Rav Shimon holds even 2 isur will not be combined. It's nana arluk like karen mitztarfin tanakamo. Rav Shimon Aimer, no, ein mitztarfin will not combine. So that's Lamaisa. We're going to learn up to 3 cases in the Brisa. Says the Gemara, let's go into another case of Neisatam Lefkam Hu Achbara. There was a mouse, one of the more famous simanim in Yeridea, the mouse, the Nafal Chavita, the Shechra that fell into the barrel of beer. Asar Rav Lahu Shechra. Rav said the beer is Asar. Amru Bani Kavidi Rav Sheshes, name Kasar Neisatam Lefkam Asar. Does Rav hold the Neisatam Lefkam is Asar? The mouse certainly didn't give a good taste to the beer, and he said it's Asar. Rav Sheshes, but almost of Ram the son of Kam is mut. Rav really holds it to mutter. Why over here is it also chidishu da mimas mois? Says the Gemara, you know why? In this case, Rav holds it to usher is because Savai Rav excuse me. The mimas mois, because the sharets, the mouse is repulsive. Ubedili inshemine, people are going not to eat it either way. Fafilu hachi asur achmana. And even so, the Torah says it's aser. Nami aser. Therefore, even if it gives a negative taste, it will be aser. Meaning, Rav holds normally it's going to be mutter. But over here, Rav is going to say that the sheretz is going to be aser. You know why a chiddush? Because since the sheretz is ma'os, people aren't going to eat it. And yet, and even so, the Torah is telling us it's aser. Therefore, everything else will be aser as well. That what? Only dafko by shrotzim is noitiv tam lefkam aser, but normally noitiv tam lefkam will be mutter. Amr le Rabbanan Rav Sheshes alameata letame lach v'yavish. If this is true, then it should make tameh, it should transmit tumra, whether it's wet or dry. Alama tanan, why do we learn metamim lachem bavei metamim yavishin? Says Marweidu l'taimeich shechva zera tetamei lach v'yavish. Should be the same thing, shechva zera, which is malus. Alama tanan metamim lachem only v'im tam yavishin. Elamai, what are you going to answer me? Ischlamema shechva zera. Amar Rachmana b'ra'uya lahazriya. That you know what it means when it says shechva zera is going to be metame, is only if it's roya lahazriya, which is only when it's moist, but if it's dry, it's haroya lahazriya chnami. Over here as well, in the case of the sheretz b'moisam, Torah says when it's dead, Amar Rachmana ke'ein moisam, it means that it's only when they're similar to being dead when it's moist. Meaning you're right. Be'etz and the sheretz should only be metame. When, it should be dami in all forms. But because we have Gzeres like Kasav, that's why the Gemara is saying not. Ask the Gemara, Maskler, I've seen me in Aradai in the first white line of Mimais. But is the Sharetz repulsive? But they're served to kings, the kings a mice. Amar, I've seen me in Aradai, like Kasha, Bidabraha, Bidit Masa. The mouse that's served on the table of kings is a mouse of the field, a squirrel. The mouse of Rav Sheshes is repulsive, is the mouse of the city, something that we don't necessarily associate with. Pick it up from here, B'siyata Dishmaya.